Good early morning, everybody. You're listening live to another edition of Real Steel Sports with your wonderful, fantastic host, Mr. James Kuznarek. The clock just struck midnight in the Eastern Standard Time, and it just struck midnight on the week 4 of the 2013 NFL season. It's funny because when I used to do these wrap-up shows for different NFL weekends, I would do my show, my segment, I should say, the good, the bad, and the ugly, where I'd pick 3 things that were good, bad, or ugly for this weekend and talk about them. And I've decided to bring that segment back because I had a lot of people say they liked it, so I'm going to do it once again. So we have from week 4 of the 2013 NFL season, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Should I give you guys the good news or the bad news first? I'll give you the good news. Well, I think it might have been my mistake to not include Peyton Manning as a preseason NFL MVP, and I'm very much regretting it right now, 4 weeks in, because, pardon me, I seem to be having technical difficulties here. Spreaker has frozen. I'm going to currently try to see if I can unfreeze it real quick. This could take a minute. Still having some problems here, trying to figure out what this problem could be. Okay, we're back online here. Sorry about the delay. But when I did my preseason predictions and I did not mention Peyton Manning as an MVP candidate, I'm regretting that very much right now. Because Peyton Manning, I'm going to give you the statistics he's currently on pace for. He's on pace to complete 468 passes, which would be a career high even for him. Out of 624 attempts, for a completion percentage, an NFL record of 75%. For 5,880 yards, 64 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. That's the season he's on pace for, and has a pass rating of 138.0. It's hard enough just to have a pass rating of that during a regular season game or any kind of game, let alone an NFL season. That's making what he did in 2004, 2009, and what Aaron Rodgers did a couple years ago in 2011 look like absolutely nothing. He has just looked ridiculously good since the season started. I mean, Denver right now, I know this Denver Bronco offense may not quite be as prolific when all said and done as the Patriots were about 4 or 5 years ago, but damn, they're pretty freaking good. They've been able to just run the score up on everybody. And the scary thing is that this isn't a one-dimensional offense. The 2013 Denver Broncos, their rushing ranking might not be that impressive. They're 15th in the league in yards, 18th in the league in yards per attempt. But, damn, you give it Peyton Manning a run game that averages 119 yards a game, which is like 15, 20 yards better than his Colts teams used to give him back in his MVP seasons. Oh, man, I hate to have to be the defensive coordinator of the team that they're going up against. Following, should I say now, last night's victory by the New Orleans Saints over the Miami Dolphins in the Louisiana Superdome, there are now 5 unbeaten teams remaining in the NFL. We have the 4-0 New England Patriots. The Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs are also 4-0, as are the New Orleans Saints and the Seattle Seahawks. What has been really impressive, if you look at all these teams, they've each gotten to 4-0 in a different way. Kansas City's rejuvenated after what they were through last year. They've got 4 wins already this year, and they had 2 all of last year. And they've just looked like a completely different team. Justin Houston, their outside linebacker, is on pace to record almost 30 sacks. Record exactly 30 sacks, I might add. I mean, their defense is playing well. They're one of the best defense in the league. They got an offense in the middle of the pack, which is enough to score enough points to win games. They're playing very, very well right now. Denver's just done it by overpowering teams with offense. New England's done it, in my opinion, more impressively than any of the other teams, and that's not taking away anything from Denver, but you look at the fact that Tom Brady's throwing to guys like Aaron Dobson and Julian Edelman, and he's having not a great season by standards, but still a Pro Bowl year for any quarterback. That's impressive enough. And the fact that Patriots defense is finally starting to bear fruit after going through a year of like a yearly, it seemed like it was almost like a yearly occurrence where the Patriots would just give up hundreds of thousands of yards every single game because they just could not either A, get off the field, or B, their other offenses just, would just rack up points like hell if they committed a turnover. You got New Orleans, who's been very, very good on both sides of the football, and you've got Seattle, 4-0. In my opinion, still the best team in the NFL, period. I know Denver's been impressive, but what Seattle's been able to do shutting teams down, 4 games, they've given up 47 points for a grand total of just over 10 points per game. That's really impressive. And they played some good offenses, too. Like, they played Houston, they played San Francisco, 2 good teams. And they held those 2 teams combined to 23 points. And the final thing under the good category, even though I could probably get crucified in Pittsburgh for saying this, is that Cleveland is good. I don't believe it, but the Cleveland Browns are actually playing well. Noah Nacarado, 2011 high school graduate alongside myself. If you're listening to this broadcast right now, take this moment and enjoy the glory, because unless the Browns win the Super Bowl, you are not going to get any more positive feedback about Cleveland from me. But here it is. Cleveland, with Mike Holmgren, Rob Chudzinski as their head coach, and Brian Hoyer at their quarterback position, are actually not bad. Think about it. They're 2-2 and they're tied for first in the AFC North. Now, will they win the division? Yeah, that's still kind of a hell of a stretch, but in free agency, they went out and they brought in a couple of really good players. They brought in Paul Kruger from Baltimore. They got Willis McGahee. I know they signed rather late because of the trade of Trent Richardson, but looking back on it now, Trent Richardson trade was actually a good thing for the franchise, because although he's more like a 3 yards in a cloud of dust back, he's like an end-of-game grinding back, what they need in Indianapolis, not what they need in Cleveland. They're stocking up picks so they can go ahead and get a quarterback, but Brian Hoyer could be the guy that they need. Think about it. How about that? It'd be really funny for Cleveland if Brian Hoyer was the guy they always needed or always dreamed of having at the helm, and yet now they don't have to waste a pick on a quarterback. But ironically enough, in the draft, if they have a chance to get Manziel, they'll probably skip him for somebody else, and Hoyer will suck. Cleveland curse. But the pick of Barkevious Mingo by the Browns, 6th overall, I thought was one of the best draft picks, because Barkevious Mingo was an absolute stud at LSU. He was a beast of a linebacker. And now you give him the ability to roam free up in Cleveland, the rest of the AFC North is going to be scared of him for the next 15 years. The way he plays. He's fast. He's strong. He's a great pass rusher. He can stop the run. He can do it all. Cleveland right now, the future is actually looking brighter for them than it is the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I never ever thought I'd say in my lifetime. Speaking of the Steelers, I'll get to them later, but time to move on to the next part of my show. The bad segment, where things go from happiness to grumpy cat instantly. There wasn't really a whole lot of really bad this weekend. They're more ugly than anything, and I'll get to that, but injuries were definitely a key part of what happened this weekend. and definitely are going to have a lot of impact on the next few weeks and potentially the rest of the season. The Colts lost their rookie pass rusher Bjorn Warner 4 to 6 weeks with a foot injury. Vince Wilfork, the nose tackle of the New England Patriots, and the only New England Patriot defensive player on that roster that has a ring with the Patriots, has torn his Achilles, and he's done for the year. And then Jake Locker, the starting quarterback for the Titans, he hurt his hip/knee, had to get carted off the field, and he's going to be gone for at least 4 to 8 weeks. So, for those two teams, New England, Indianapolis, and Tennessee, New England sitting pretty undefeated, 4 wins, and Tennessee and Indy at 3-1. That's not really something they can afford, but the fact Ryan Fitzpatrick's a pretty good backup quarterback. I think he'll do okay in Locker's absence. You can't replace Bjorn Warner's still a rookie, so you can always, get a guy in there to more or less do his job. Besides, the Colts are a team based on scoring points anyway. They put up points with their offense with Andrew Luck and Reggie Wayne. But Vince Wilfork was a huge loss for that Patriots defense, because if there's been any guy in that Patriots defense the last few years, and they've been horrendously bad, particularly against the pass, that has had any kind of success in disrupting any offensive rhythm, it's Vince Wilfork. You put that guy in the center and watch him just take over games. I think there was a point during the 2011 NFL season where Vince Wilfork by himself, a nose tackle, a position that might lend you maybe 3 interceptions in a career, had more interceptions that season than the entire Steeler defense did at that point. Damn good player. Damn good player. Damn good player. The NFC East turned in another miserable performance. And I think people are really, really starting to realize that when you talk about the best divisions in football, you can't bring up the NFC East. You're just going to get laughed at. The combined record of these teams is 4-12. 2-1-3 teams, the 2-2 Cowboys, and the winless Giants. Meanwhile, you look at other divisions that aren't exactly expected to do well, like the AFC West. They're 11-5. They're 11-5 through 4 weeks. And that was a division that it was pretty much just Denver and a bunch of wannabes. Well, right now, other than Oakland, every team in that division is a decent team. San Diego maybe could use some help on defense, but that's it. They're 2-2. Meanwhile, the Chiefs and the Broncos are 4-0. But the NFC East, you have, really, in all honesty, no team from this division deserves to go to the playoffs. I'm serious. I remember a few years ago when Seattle made the playoffs at 7-9 and beat the Saints, which I'm still having a hard time getting over. But at least what Seattle did was they rose to the occasion, turned it on a little bit as the season went on, and started to mentally show that they wanted it and deserved it. I mean, as much as that division sucked that year, there had to be somebody. And Seattle played well enough, and they deserved it to go down the stretch. I mean, that team wasn't a great team, but you had Marshawn Lynch, Matt Hasselbeck, and a defense with a couple of good players on it. So, yeah, you were definitely bound to get some good production out of them. But this is a completely different scenario altogether, because you have the New York Giants, who have been just mired in their own mistakes, have no offensive line and no pass rush, two things that used to absolutely scare the living daylights out of their opponents during the years they were in the playoffs and going for the Super Bowls with Eli Manning at quarterback. You've got Washington team that has no defense to speak of, a quarterback who's still still shaking off the rust after his knee injury. You've got a situation in Philly where you've got an offense that can score points, but if they don't score if they don't score points fast enough, the defense gets gassed and they give up 52 points like in Denver. And you've got Dallas, which is the NFL's ultimate soap opera. So there's really nothing. At least Seattle in 2010 was a team and, bonded together. None of these groups of players are teams. The Giants have always had infighting. The Redskins have infighting because you've got Shanahan and he's kind of out there emotionally as a head coach. Philly, you've got a bunch of interesting characters on that team. I mean, they just came off having the dream team, which amounted to 2 shitty seasons that cost Andy Reid his job. Excuse me. Then you have the Dallas Cowboys, the soap opera that has been since whenever Jerry Jones took over that team. Whenever Jerry Jones fired Jimmy Johnson over a stupid whatever argument, they've not been good since. If Jimmy Johnson would have stayed the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys in the mid-'90s, they probably would have won about 4 Super Bowls on top of the 2 they already won because they were that good. Barry Switzer didn't know how to run an NFL team, and Jerry Jones does not either. He's put together a couple of playoff teams in the last few years, but one win since 1996 does not count as a playoff team consistently. And the final thing to discuss under the bad category would be the horrendous offensive line play of the Miami Dolphins. And that I feel bad for Ryan Tannehill. I really do, because right now Miami's a very good team, and I think has a very good chance to take the AFC East, from New England. And that's, in my opinion, only because of the fact I still don't know how these rookie receivers from New England are going to do down the stretch. At least in Miami, you've got established playmakers like Brian Hartline and Mike Wallace. But, geez, the guy's been sacked this year. These guys been sacked 18 times, they said John Gruden said on Monday Night Football, in 4 games. He's on pace to get sacked 72 times, which would tie the record held by David Carr for the expansion Houston Texans in 2002. That tells me one of 2 things. Either A, he's not getting the ball out of his hand enough because his receivers are not that good, which people are finally starting to realize that Mike Wallace is overrated. To B, his offensive line really isn't that good. And let me tell you something. The Saints defenders had a field day with the passing game of the Miami Dolphins. If they didn't have the ability to run for like 100-something yards, if Miami's rushing total might have been cut in half, if they wouldn't have had trouble running the football, that game probably would have been a 58-0 blowout. Worse than it was. I mean, 38-17. It could have been 30 points the differential, not 21. I think when I did my weekly pigskin pick'em on ESPN and gave the score 31-20 to New Orleans, I think I was being a little bit generous to Miami. All right, and now it's time to move on to the final segment of this show, which is the part where things just get downright vile. Vomit-inducing, disgusting, all those pretty words, all those pretty terms. I could start off with the winless wonders, the Jags, the Giants, the Bucks, and my Steelers, but I think I'm going to go in a different direction, and it's the contenders that are falling apart. I'm just adding a contender to the list that I just thought of that is falling apart. You've got the Baltimore Ravens, who, with 5 interceptions from Joe Flacco, pretty much shot themselves in the foot to the point where I think they actually shot their foot off completely in the 23-20 loss to Buffalo that dropped them to a 3-way tie for first in the AFC North. I don't know. I mean, I understand Flacco deserved to get paid for what he did in the playoffs, but I still think that it's a hell of a stretch to call him elite. That I still think the reason he's been a good quarterback for so long is because of the fact that he's had Ray Lewis as a leader, and you take Lewis out of that locker room and look what you get. This team has looked disorganized this year. They've looked very disorganized in their 4 games. I mean, yes, they beat Cleveland, which is one thing. And then you add in the fact, not only that, but this team did beat Houston good, which was one thing, but Houston's another team I'll talk about in a minute. But Baltimore's not the same team they were last year. They're not. Taking Ray Lewis out of that locker room because of his retirement and losing Anquan Bolden, Dennis Pitta with an injury, Matt Burke to retirement. Bolden, of course, was traded to the 49ers. Paul Kruger to the Browns, Danae Ellerby to the Dolphins, Ed Reed to the Texans. You're going to have a hell of a drop-off. I mean, look at the statistics for the Ravens. They ranked 28th in rushing. I never ever thought a team with Ray Rice that played in Baltimore with any kind of defensive mentality would rank that low in rushing. I know the Steelers are horrible running the football, and they're probably ranked lower than this, but this is just ridiculous, considering the fact that this Ravens team has talent on that line and has a damn good running back, something the Steelers don't, and yet they're barely doing any better. The other contenders are falling apart, like the Texans. Now, honestly, this is my firm belief. If Matt Schaub had not gotten hurt in 2011, had he not had that Liz Frank injury and missed half the season and had TJ Yates take over, I think the Texans would have won the Super Bowl. And here's the reason why. Because I think the Patriots' defense from 2011 to 2012 improved a lot. And I think that had a lot to do with and their offense improved a lot too. Like, I think 2011 they were a good team, but I think in 2012 on both sides of the ball they were better. The fact that Ravens team at that point played a phenomenal second half, I think is the only reason why they didn't get to the Super Bowl again. But on to my point. Houston, with Matt Schaub, would have still beaten the Bengals. Would have beaten the Patriots in Foxborough. Would have beaten the Ravens in the divisional game, but they lost on the 8-3 interceptions. And I think they would have beaten the Giants in the Super Bowl because the Giants were not going to run the football against Houston's defense. And honestly, the way that team played the secondary that year, they weren't throwing it much either. Houston could have definitely won that Super Bowl in 2011 to 2012 had Matt Schaub not gotten hurt. And now look at it, a few years later, Matt Schaub's the reason holding them back. They need a franchise quarterback, and Schaub does not provide them with what they need. He can get you 8-9 regular season wins. He can't get you a playoff. He can't get you what you want in the playoffs with a win. The Bears also lost too. 3 interceptions from Cutler against the Lions, a couple of defensive touchdowns. Yeah, that'll kind of kill your momentum and end your 3-0 start. Yeah, you kind of need to play well against all the teams, not just the ones that are the jokes like the Steelers. Or I shouldn't say the Steelers are a joke. I should just say that they're just a mess at this point. But 2 teams that have really surprised me this year are the Bengals and the Falcons. Like, even though New Orleans is coming off, getting Sean Payton back, I thought they'd be a better team. But I did not think that they'd be this far ahead of Atlanta in the division. Like, I'm looking at the standings right now for the NFL. And right now, the Atlanta Falcons sit at 1-3. Making them, they are now 3 games back of New Orleans in the NFC South. All New Orleans has to do pretty much is win half their games the rest of the way. If they go 10-6, they'll win the division because Atlanta's not going to go 9-3 the rest of the way. They're a good team, but they just don't have. They have what's missing. They have something missing from this team, and I think it has to do with their quarterback. As good as Matt Ryan is, I just don't think he has that killer instinct that he can win you a Super Bowl. I think Flacco had it to a degree last year, but I think it was kind of a coming and going thing. And I think Atlanta's in deep trouble the rest of the season. Like, so far right now, terrible running the football. Yes, they're good throwing the football, but they are really, really making Matt Ryan do too much. You look at their schedule the rest of the season versus the Jets and Bucks, at the Cardinals and then Panthers, host Seattle, at Tampa, host New Orleans, at Buffalo, then Green Bay, versus Washington, at San Fran, then home against Carolina. Okay, 1, 2, 3. They could potentially reel off 8 or 9 games, but New Orleans is not going to fall apart to the point where they don't take that division. I think right now, Atlanta's already dug himself a big enough hole, and not having Steven Jackson next few weeks is really going to hurt. But the final one I want to bring up is the Bengals, because this was a lot of people's sexy pick to go to the Super Bowl. And I'm only talking about it because people are surprised about it, but I'm not. I honestly don't look at Cincinnati and think that this is a Super Bowl contending football team because, yes, I know the AFC Denver after Denver is weak, but I mean, I don't think their secondary is very good. I don't think that their running game. I know Gino Bernard's had a great year, but I don't think their running game is that good. I know for a fact their offensive line isn't particularly good. Pretty much, Andy Dalton's going to have to win games, and he's not as good as Joe Flacco. He can't do it. I mean, if you play joke teams like the Jags, Giants, and Bucks every week, then yeah, I understand you're going to play well, but I mean, you can't have those. You're not going to get those. You need to beat the good teams. Speaking of those teams, the Jags, Giants, Bucks, and Steelers all lost and are now 0-4. Jacksonville is just has no talent at all. They're talentless. Maurice Jones-Drew is going to leave that team. I don't blame him. He's going to go somewhere, get a hell of a lot of money, and then suck. So that's kind of how it's going to go. And they'll rebuild for the next few years, and they'll laugh in his face, and they're good again. And you have the Giants, that game was close against in Kansas City, 10-7 for a while, and then Chiefs just pulled away because the Giants have just no mental capacities. They don't have any mental capacity at all to do well. And the Buccaneers blew a 10-point fourth quarter lead. Fitzgerald beating Darrelle Revis, I was very, very much pleased with that. I lost the pigskin pick'em thing, but I don't care. My heart was glad that Fitzgerald beat Revis of all people. But the one final segment of this ugly and the one final segment of this show I'm going to use on my Steelers is that we go into a bye week now. We should have won the game against Minnesota because I've been watching the Steelers play football for about 10 years now, and I've never ever seen a team that has looked this disoriented. And honestly, issues such as the offensive line was not too bad. I felt that we made a couple of strides running the football, but what cost us this game this week was tackling. It's one thing if you do a lot of things well as a football team, and maybe one thing or two things is a little bit of a hitch, but you can overcome it. But when one different thing breaks down pretty much every week, it's time to fire the coach. Because there's no discipline, there's no, evaluating of mistakes, and everybody just thinks, we'll probably just go 7-9, that way we all can keep our jobs. No. Yes, I like the Steelers to do well. Yes, I love when they win games, and it makes me happy as hell when they win games. However, if a 3-13 season is necessary to get the bad eggs out so we can start over and rebuild and actually be a good team again, I'm in for it. 0-4 at this point, sign me up for the top pick in the draft. I'd rather have the top pick in the draft than 9-7. I'm serious. Because by then you have 16 draft picks you lose, and unless you want to trade somebody to get a first-round pick, there's nobody good enough on the roster to trade that you want to get rid of, because you have sentiment to your old guys, your old bums. The Steelers have dug themselves a big hole. I'll tell you what they should have done was. Should have fired Tomlin after the year was over, and fired Haley after last season was over, and really looked at a good head coach, an offensive-minded head coach. That Mark Trestman in Chicago, that's a guy I would have loved to have seen coach the Steelers, because that would have brought out some really good stuff at Ben. A quarterback coach. That's what we need. Alright, that's my show today, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Should be soon to turn in soon enough, when I'll break down Week 5's NFL games coming up very shortly.